Most automation failures don't happen because the technology breaks. They happen because judgment disappears. That's not a dramatic statement. It's an observation. When something works well enough, people stop paying attention to it. They trust it. They lean on it. They step back. And over time, responsibility quietly shifts. Not intentionally, not maliciously, just gradually. Automation feels like relief. It removes friction. It saves time. It handles things we don't want to think about anymore. And in many cases, that's exactly what it should do. But there's a common assumption that slips in alongside that relief. If it's automated, it must be safer, or at least more reliable. That assumption feels reasonable. Machines don't get tired. They don't forget steps. They don't get distracted. So it's tempting to believe that once something is automated, the risk goes down. Sometimes it does, but only if judgment stays present. Because automation doesn't remove decision-making, it executes decisions. And if the decision being executed is flawed, automation doesn't fix that. It multiplies it. This is where things quietly go wrong. Not all at once, not in obvious ways. At first, everything looks fine. The system produces results. The output matches expectations. Nothing appears broken. So attention drifts elsewhere. Oversight becomes lighter. Assumptions go unchallenged. Edge cases are ignored. And when something finally does fail, it often feels sudden. But it isn't. The failure usually began much earlier, when judgment stopped being applied. This isn't a problem with machines. It's a problem with how humans relate to systems that work. When something feels reliable, we stop questioning it. We stop asking whether the conditions around it have changed. We stop checking whether the original assumptions still hold. And automation is very good at hiding that drift, because it keeps producing output, even when the context has shifted. Even when the inputs no longer mean what they used to. Even when the outcome isn't aligned with what actually matters anymore. Automation doesn't notice that misalignment. It can't. It doesn't understand meaning. It understands execution. This is why judgment matters most after automation is in place, not before. Before automation, people are involved by default. They notice inconsistencies. They feel friction. They sense when something isn't right. After automation, those signals disappear. Everything feels smoother, which is exactly when judgment needs to stay active. But that's also when it tends to fade. This is the part most people miss. They think automation replaces work. What it really replaces is attention. And attention is where judgment lives. When attention is removed, decisions continue to be made, but no one is really deciding anymore. The system just keeps going. This is why automation failures often surprise people. They say things like, "We didn't realize this was happening. We didn't think it would scale like that. We assumed the system would catch it." But systems don't catch meaning. They catch conditions. And if the conditions are technically met, the system proceeds, even if the outcome is wrong. This is not a flaw, it's a boundary. Automation does exactly what it's designed to do. Nothing more, nothing less. Judgment is what exists beyond that boundary. It's what asks, should this still be happening? Does this still make sense? What are we optimizing for now? Those questions don't get asked automatically. They have to be asked intentionally. And that intention belongs to people. This is why automation without judgment doesn't just fail occasionally. It fails quietly, until the consequences are large enough to notice. And by then, unwinding the damage is much harder than preventing it would have been. This doesn't mean automation is dangerous. It means automation is powerful, and power always amplifies what's already there. Good judgment leads to better outcomes at scale. Poor judgment leads to bigger mistakes at scale. The machine doesn't know the difference. It doesn't have to. That's not its role. This is also why trust needs to be earned continuously, not assumed permanently. Trust in systems should be conditional, revisitable, responsive to change. When people say the system failed, what they often mean is, we stopped watching. And watching doesn't mean micromanaging. It means staying conceptually engaged, understanding what the system is doing and why, being willing to pause, adjust, or intervene when the situation changes. That requires judgment, and judgment requires presence. This is where many people feel tension. They want efficiency and control. They want relief and confidence. The truth is, you don't get one by giving up the other. You get both by placing judgment in the right place. Automation should handle repetition. Judgment should handle direction and oversight. When those roles are clear, systems feel supportive rather than threatening. When those roles blur, anxiety creeps in because people sense, often correctly, that something important has been handed off too far. This is why over-automation feels different from effective automation. Effective automation feels boring. It fades into the background. Over-automation feels uneasy, even when it's working, because the human no longer feels connected to the outcome. And disconnection is risky, not emotionally, operationally. Because when something goes wrong, the people involved don't know where to step back in. They've lost the map. Judgment keeps the map current. This is why judgment still matters even when things seem to be working, especially then, because success is the most dangerous time to stop paying attention. When nothing is broken, nobody wants to question the process. But that's exactly when small misalignments start to grow. Automation doesn't notice drift. Judgment does. And judgment doesn't require constant intervention. It requires periodic reorientation, asking, is this still serving the goal? Has the context changed? Would we make the same decision today? Those questions don't slow things down meaningfully. They prevent much bigger slowdowns later. This is the real cost of removing judgment, not immediate failure. Delayed consequence. And delayed consequences are harder to trace back to their source, which makes them harder to correct. So the solution isn't less automation, it's clearer ownership. Clear ownership of direction, clear ownership of evaluation, clear ownership of responsibility. Automation can execute, it can scale, it can accelerate, but it cannot decide whether what it's doing still makes sense. That responsibility doesn't disappear, it just moves. And when it's not held consciously, it creates problems unconsciously. Here's the landing thought for episode 9. Automation
doesn't remove responsibility. It concentrates it. And when judgment is absent, automation doesn't just make mistakes, it makes them bigger. So the question isn't whether to automate. The question is where judgment still needs to live, because that's where control remains. And without control, speed doesn't help. It just gets you somewhere faster, whether you meant to go there or not.